Hi and welcome to my Taste of Japan research project. During our 2 weeks in Japan and my additional third week, I was actively kind of always thinking about agriculture and not just face value agriculture, but I really wanted to understand the sort of translation from older methods to newer methods of agriculture. Sorry, I hit my window. But I really wanted to just kind of break down that transition in the middle of where that kind of blurred line is now today, and understanding the pros and cons of that sort of trade-off of whether you're taking on new methods with like electronics and technology, or if you're kind of staying very retro, and what those sort of trade-offs are and what that does for the food itself. As you all know, I make these little silly compilation videos of, what we're up to, and I went ahead and did that for my last week in Japan, not only for fun, but to help capture, I guess, the culture and identity of agriculture in Japan. Enjoy. I got it. I know the video doesn't necessarily pertain to farming, though there are some funny clips of me doing some fun little things. What I wanted to really pull from sort of those clips is the culture and community that is cultivated from farming. When I was with Taichi Kawashima, which is the name of the farmer I was with, it opened my eyes to the community that, organic and small-scale agriculture kind of provides. It was really bewildering to me, the amount of people he knew in his area and how much they helped him and how much he helped them in return. Next, I'm going to show you what I believe to be really the pivotal interview question that I asked and got an answer out of that really ended up shaping this research question.
だけどこれはもう本当に、思考好みでもあるんですが、現代の技術はいいんだけど一方で均質化を招いています。
同じようなってことですか。
そうです。
はい、
ただし、大きいサイズの稲作でやる、稲作はやはり緻密な稲作はあまり得意ではないですね。緻密な質感を求めるにはちょっと不向き。
What I want you guys to really understand and pull from those two questions is, agriculture is an art, if you will. There is a lot of patience and care that goes into your product, and being able to see what's happening and really tend to your crops is really important. If you don't remember, at the sake brewery, they told us that there's over 100 strains of sake rice in Japan, and if that were to just become one singular strain, you lose all these flavor profiles, and it all just becomes this uniform word. I guess that sake is just one thing, and it's just that is happening everywhere with agriculture, where if you're using these machines and doing really large-scale farming and resorting to new technology, you are at a cost sacrificing your character in your farm. And it extends just past sake. I kind of want to talk about also at a local farmer market in Shizuoka, Fujinimiya, that I was bringing vegetables to. I got to interview the owner of the farmer market, and I learned that not only do they have a preference for organic and more cared for product, but so does the general census of the community. They all support the smaller and more cared for product before they purchase the mass-produced monopolized farm product.
If you don't use machines, you have to do a lot of work with your hands, and maybe only my hands are not enough doing everything.
Right.
So I need to have somebody to help me or support me and doing things, and it's it's good question.
The second part of this research really came to fruition after being able to digest all the information that I learned. When I went into this research, I really wasn't thinking about the pressures or the reason why these changes were happening. I was really only assuming that it was a means of convenience for farmers, and there was no other reasoning behind those shifts. I came to learn that it's not just the convenience, but it's really derived of the economic and societal pressure to feed and also just to survive. When I talked to Taichi Kawashima, he wants help. He wants to not be the only one working in the field 12 hours a day, and it's exhausting work for him, but he can't afford to split the pay that he's already getting. For example, we're going to the store to sell a bag of edamame, for example, and each bag is usually about 250 grams. It's maybe this big, and he's selling it for 150 yen, which is probably $1 maybe. And it just, if he had to split that two ways, it's no doubt about it, he's not making enough money to sustain himself. So that's where I learned, that's where that line is drawn, is that he can't afford to pay someone else, so he has to buy machinery to speed up certain parts of his aspect. And I think he does a really good job at balancing giving into these pressures and having to adapt to this new agricultural expectation while still maintaining his personal ambition in agriculture. For example, something called the mame mogu, which was, you might have seen in a video, this lady putting in 2 stalks of edamame, and it knocks the beans out and then sifts them, and any ones that are too thin fall through. But afterwards, he doesn't just take those all and use those for his bagging. He goes through once more, we wash them, and sift the ones by hand of which ones are good and which ones probably shouldn't be sold. Doing that has a healthy balance of efficiency and taking advantage of the technological advancements of agriculture, meanwhile still cultivating the culture of his crops. He's not sacrificing the individuality of his crops. He's simply making a means of survival for himself. What I hope that you can all take away from this video is that from an anthropological perspective, as well as an agricultural perspective, preserving your culture is very important. Even sometimes if it costs more energy or labor. I think one of the most memorable things that my host farmer said to me was that even though it's hard work, at the end of the day, he's feeling fully fulfilled, and that one of his simple pleasures is like harvesting all his crops, and at the end of the day, opening a nice cold beer. And I think the moral of, I guess, the research that I've really come to understand is even if something takes a little extra work, or is a little more exhausting and requires a little more labor of you, it's always going to be worth it because there's a cultural benefactor that is coming back to you. If everything is just too easy, you kind of forget and you don't understand and you don't value what you're, consuming, whether it be food or media. Historically speaking, agriculture really gave us way to learn and, pursue academia. And if it weren't for, having agriculture, we wouldn't be where we are today. And considering Japan being, in its isolation period for such a long time, agriculture was a really big part of their identity, and it's important to preserve that happened. And I think that each and every one of us should strive to preserve things that happen in our life and not cut corners where corners may be cut. Well, I think that's all for my research, but I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope that maybe you have a shift in perspective or a change in the way you do certain things about whether it be the things you buy at the grocery store, or just maybe the things you do in day-to-day life.
ああ、いい子。ねえ、座り。